I'm just grateful for everybody that has shown up today. I am the new interim executive director for Pandion Music Foundation. We have Angelica Aguilera, who is our grant writer, and we have Natalie Dang, who is the project coordinator for Pandion. We have Jordan Strobe still here with us. She's in Australia. She was the executive director. She's going to continue to be a part of Pandion as a board member and mascot. She's contributing to our transformation as well. And I just wanted to thank everybody for their patience while we've been retooling everything the last couple of months. We're still in a refining moment. So bear with us. And so next month we'll have two more sessions, expert speaker sessions. And then in January, we will start with one a week. And they will be more holistic and 360 around the different aspects of who you are as a music creator and or as an aspiring music professional. So I wanted to introduce today's session, which is Music Revenue 101, 5 key ways music generates income, which is designed to give you a clear, practical foundation for understanding how music creators earn income across different areas, from recordings, publishing, to live performance and licensing. And we have our expert here today, who I'm ecstatic to present, who I had the pleasure of meeting with in a music industry women's networking group called The Lab here in Los Angeles. This is Cedar Boschan. She's the founder and CEO of Boschan Corp, a leading forensic accounting firm. Her insights have been featured in Rolling Stone, the Wall Street Journal, and NPR, and she's taught music royalties at the Los Angeles College of Music. And so I'm going to hand it over to Cedar, and then I'll have some other questions at the end. And I'll be interfacing throughout this process to ensure that everybody is having a qualitative experience. So thank you so much for being here today. Cedar, please go forth.
Thank you, Co, and thank you for your thoughtful introduction and for letting us know what is going on at Pandion. And it was a great introduction. Just a few more things about me so you understand what my vantage point may be in the music industry. I have over 30 years of experience in the music industry and almost 25 years of experience as an accountant in the music industry. But before that, before the accounting career, I did a lot of things in the music industry. And so I was involved in live music. I worked at a record company. I was an account executive at a PR and marketing firm. I worked at a music publisher, and I've also taught royalty accounting and applied economics at Los Angeles College of Music. So that's just a little about me, so you understand what my experience is. Today, very briefly, we're going to address 5 music income streams: live, recordings, music publishing, merchandise, and name, image, and likeness or endorsements. And I just want to make it really clear that this presentation is geared towards independent artists. And also what is driving that agenda is this, that really there are 2 music income streams that are tied to 2 music copyrights in the music industry. And then everything else, like the live and the merch and the name, image, and likeness, those are all ancillary sectors. And so truly there's only 2 literal music income streams. One comes from the musical work or song, and the other comes from the recording of that song. So if Co wrote a song and I recorded it, Co would be the songwriter and I would be the recording artist. And I'm sure you'll attend an event from an attorney that'll get into much more detail about this, but there's really just 2 main copyrights in the music industry. And from those copyrights are 2 income streams, which are the publishing and the recording income stream. And then the other income streams are ancillary. And so we wanted to cover all of that. I think it's informative to look at things from a consumer perspective, which on average, consumers spend only $100 globally on music, although they spend much more than that in the United States. They spend almost $500. And basically, more than half of that is spending on live. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about how to tap into live music revenue today. And then Another, big chunk of that, about 20% or more, is from the recordings. And so we're going to focus a lot on that. And we're going to focus a little bit on merchandise and other income streams. So as you can see, this is an estimate of global revenues in the whole world, and it's measured in US dollars. And live is at 35 billion, recordings are at 30 billion, merch is at 14 billion, and publishing is now, the numbers just came out last week, is now at 14 billion as well. So those are the global revenues that are generated by those four income streams. And I want you to understand that these are revenues, they don't include the costs. This is not the same as profit. So live production can be expensive. And so live might not be the most profitable, but it is where most of the revenue is. And the revenue is where we're focusing today to teach you how to tap into live performance income, recordings income, music publishing income, merchandise income, and name, image, and likeness income. Those are the five streams that we're going to focus on. It's going to be a little detailed, but before we get going, does anybody have any questions about core income streams? Like just generally, what are there where you don't understand the difference between one or are confused about anything at this point? Okay, hearing nothing. I will, actually, let me check the chat. Yeah, no questions so far. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move ahead to the first income stream that we're going to talk about today, which is live music. And first, I'd like to point out to you, there's a trade in the live music industry called Polestar. And if you go to polestar.com, you can really learn a lot about who's charging the most and the least ticket prices, who's generating the most income. And as you know, a snapshot of who's generating a lot of income last year in 2024. Oops, I wanted to go back there, but last year in 2024, the top three tours were Taylor Swift, Coldplay, and Pink. So it's very American oriented, at least it was last year, although things are changing in that area. But if you go on to polestar.com, you can see more up-to-date information. Like this is showing the greatest average box office gross over the last 3 months. And we've got The Weeknd, Chris Brown, the Eagles, Shakira, Lady Gaga, Guns N' Roses. So those are examples of artists that are grossing a lot of money. And you can really just learn a lot on Polestar that might make you think about what kind of genre you want to focus on. And so anyway, we're going to get into how you can tap into that revenue, or an independent artist can, because I'm assuming here most of us are indie artists in the audience.
I'm gonna ask a question. I mean, how many of you are actually leveraging touring as a means to generate income? Any of you here, Clifford, Megan, Jody, Warren, Anan, Raphael? How many of you are Carly? Any of you really focusing on touring as a means to market yourselves and generate income? I know, Jordan, you're rehearsing to do some live shows, right? Jordan? Yeah?
Yeah, I play live.
Anybody else? Because it is a really important aspect as a manager. I am also an artist manager. I would encourage you. Eventually is the goal. Okay. Things to think about. Okay,
Yeah.
keep going. Keep going.
Okay. Sure. So one thing to keep in mind about live music is that it can be part of your record deal. We'll talk about recordings later, but if you make a record deal, whether it be with an independent company or with a major label, sometimes those record companies, because they have invested a lot in marketing, want to participate in the tour revenue or profit. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that it can be part of your record deal. But anyway, we're going to move ahead into, assuming you probably don't have a record deal. One thing to consider is, will this tour be profitable? Or is it more of a marketing expense, right? You're going to get some money from your tour, and we're going to talk about that. But not all tours are profitable. There's different reasons to go on tour. And so I'm going to show you how to tap into that revenue and hopefully manage some of your costs. But really, this is a focus on revenue, not profitability. And the first tip is to have a tour budget. So you can't just have no plan. And so please make sure you put together a tour budget. This is a sample tour budget that you could use as a template. It's going to be in the slides. We basically want to project for how much income is going to come in and what the expenses will be to make sure you can stay on the road and don't end up in a cash crisis. And I've included here in the materials some relevant links for you to help you create a tour budget. There's different spreadsheets and templates. And then there's also the Indie Venue Bible. There's things to help you book a tour and even things to help you market your tour on social media, like buying ads. So I highly recommend you click on those links. My second tip to unlock, live music performance as an income stream is you need to focus on pre-production. If you don't do some planning up front, you're not going to be able to collect your cash, which we're going to talk about in the next two sections. So in terms of pre-production, I want to make the point that I think Jordan understands, which is the tour starts before the tour with rehearsal, team building, booking, and doing marketing and promotion ahead of the tour. It's not really a fly by the seat of your pants kind of endeavor. It's something you want to spend a lot of time planning and pre-producing up front. And I'm surprised I didn't mention it already in the budget section, but I am a big fan of signage. Make sure you invest in getting a lot of signage up front, both for the stage and for the merch table. You want it to get people's attention and take them somewhere where they can sign up on your mailing list and where they can buy merch and things like find you and know what the band is and show it in the pictures and everything like that. And then you also want to spend time in pre-production putting together your team. And I don't think people think about this a lot. And sometimes you don't have a lot of choice, but there's a link here that can help you understand what a tour manager does, and you can decide whether you need one. But also I want to make the point that the person or people, if you have enough business that you can afford that, the people that you hire or bring with you to sell merch and also to get people to sign up on your list, make sure that they're outgoing and affable and are representing your brand well. Because while you're on stage, you want to be able to tell people where to find them and take some time to introduce them. And so people actually learn more and sign up on your mailing list.
I'm going to quickly jump into, I think what Cedar's saying is really imperative, again, because I've worked with so many different artists and managed bands, is that artists don't recognize or they don't remember that capturing data is really important. Like who is your fan base? It's not just people that are on social media. You actually want to have a direct connect with them, either with a mobile number or with an actual email, because it's important to deepen the engagement of who you are as an artist and who your audience can be. It could be one person, 10 people, 20 people, but it's all relevant and important. And the other part that Cedar was mentioning about planning is uber important and key. If you're not a big band like Coldplay or Taylor Swift or whoever, do localized touring, do a backyard tour, figure it out, like start playing your music out live on the most smallest scale. It doesn't matter. Just get into it. I know plenty of artists that busk, because they want to have the experience of what it's like to play in front of one person, 10 people, or 100 people. And then the merch piece, make cheap merch to then re-identify and brand yourselves, which could simply be a sticker. So anyway, I just wanted to hammer in that point because I think
in that pre-production section, another tip that I have in there that I didn't mention is order that merch early. So you have merch to sell, because that's a whole other income stream. So good point there. And so another thing that you want to be doing before you go on tour, well, I mentioned marketing in general, but this is some more specific advice. You have to have like an EPK, which means electronic press kit, which is really, you can have it up on your website, but it's going to help you book your gigs. It's going to help you get publicity and promotion. And so you need to have that up and running so you can send people a link that has your music linked so that somebody can decide if they want to book you or not. Then there's this great tutorial on running social media ads for a tour that for sure is worthwhile. I linked it in this section. But mainly, you want to make sure that you have invested in that signage and doing everything you can in these different areas to get attention to maximize the value of your tour. And also there's things you need to do to get organized up front, which aren't very fun. This is on the accounting side of things. You want to have these ready to go if you're on tour. This is called a settlement sheet. And so every night you want to fill in not only the venue name and the date, but also the income that you generated, or the revenue that was generated, and then the costs that you incurred. And this includes merch, and you can actually keep track of your merchandise inventory. So it's really important to have that ready to go so that you can keep track of things and have records for tax purposes. So now we're going to get to the fun part, which is actually the money. So there's two ways to get paid in live music: upfront and on the back end. And so we're going to start with the upfront payment amounts. And so there's basically 5 ways you can get paid upfront before you even go on tour. And so the first one is tour support, which is an independent artist you may not have available to you. This is money from a record label. So if you have a record deal, the record label might have an interest in helping you go out to promote the record by touring. And so it may give you an advance to help cover your costs for like lodging and promotional stuff and transportation, of course. However, that money is not free. It is recoupable. So what that means is if I sign if I'm a record company that signs and I give a $50,000 tour support advance, and when earns $100,000 in royalties from her recordings, then she will only be paid by me $50,000 because I will recoup the $50,000 for tour support. I'm sorry, that's too complicated, but the point is it's a loan basically that you're getting, and you just want to keep that in mind. But that's one place you could get upfront money. Another idea would be to do crowdfunding from your fans. And so the 3 biggest ones are Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Patreon, but there are other platforms. And this goes into some comparison of the strengths and weaknesses of these different main platforms, but I'm not going to get into it. Each has pros and cons. But when you do crowdfunding, I have 2 caveats to point out to you. Number 1, you could either give whoever's making a donation to your crowdfunding campaign a product or an experience in exchange for that donation, or you could allow them to participate in the profit of your tour. I'm here to tell you, don't do the profit one. It is basically illegal. I mean, it takes a lot of compliance to comply with SEC issues. You just don't want to do that. Don't cut anybody in using crowdfunding for a share of the profit. It's only for an experience or a product. Otherwise, you need to hire an attorney to help you. And then another caveat is that if you are just an individual and you're, reporting taxes on a cash basis, like most individuals do, you're going to need to spend all the money you raise in the same year. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay taxes on all of it before you get the benefit of the write-offs. And so either you can structure it within a corporate touring entity, which is on an accrual basis, which you can report it at a different time. Or you want to just be thoughtful about the time that you're touring relative to the time where you're getting the crowdfunding money, because you don't want to have to pay taxes on that and then the expenses, and you wouldn't get the benefit till the following year. So here's some best practices for crowdfunding. I'm not going to get into the details here, but it's just here for you if you want it in the materials. And I'm going to move on to the third way that you can get upfront cash for your tour, which is getting a sponsor. Basically, a sponsor is a partnership with a corporate entity or another organization that provides money or goods or promotion in exchange for exposure during your tour. And so, some common types of sponsors that you can go after, especially at an independent level, would be like local businesses, music gear companies, as well as outlets, media outlets. And so you can get cash up front or things you need for your tour, including fuel cards, as well as cross promotion and media support. So that's something to look into. This is a very basic way to get upfront cash that it's almost like you'd think it would be the first one, but I think a lot of times it's not the first to come in, which is gig guarantees. And so basically, when you're booking with a promoter or a venue to play a particular date, you can make different kinds of deals, with that talent buyer. And some of those deals, in fact, most of them, when you get to a bigger level, and the smaller you are, the less common this is, but a lot of them include an upfront guarantee. And so basically, it gives you security that you'll get at least this much instead of just having like a split of the door, for example. And so if you have the leverage, it's probably something you want to be asking for. And I put some ranges in here for the kinds of guarantees you could think about asking for, but you also need to be realistic and do the math yourself and say, okay, how many people am I realistically bringing in? Is this, what kind and what are they paying? What kind of, and it basically an advance or a guarantee is reasonable. But we'll talk more about these kinds of deals in the next section. So here's some more detail about things that you can do when you're booking for guarantees. I think you should be working with an attorney if you have a contract. So this isn't meant to substitute for that. But we'll talk about the way that the deal can be structured in the next slide or slide after this. So the fifth way that you can get upfront cash is from grants. And that's sort of similar to sponsorship, except it's usually coming from like a nonprofit or a foundation, which could basically want to foster certain types of, social or arts goals or cultural goals and might give you money to do things. I have a client who is sponsored by a nonprofit, and basically you have to write a grant or you have to write a proposal to get a grant is the way it works. And so that can take a lot of time. And so that's something you would do in the pre-production phase. And my advice is, I gave you some examples of places you could go for grants, but my advice is to do research and find some opportunities that you think you'd have a really good shot at and focus on those, because the world of grants can be very overwhelming and you want to make sure you're spending your time where you can get a result, because writing those grants, it takes a long time. So, but that's the fifth way you could get upfront money before you even go on tour.
Okay,
Then,
let me just ask really quick. Is everybody clear? I also want to let you know that all of these slides, when Cedar's going through it, where she's skipping over some, everybody's going to get this presentation so you can be with it and review it at your own pace. However, I wanted her to go over the top line, but where we are right now, are there any questions? Is everybody clear so far? Okay, keep going. Thank you, Cedar.
Sure. So we're going to talk about the back end of how you get paid instead of just the upfront cash, which we just talked about. How do you get paid even more? And so most of that is called contingent compensation. And we're going to go over 4 areas of contingent compensation. The first thing I want to explain is, what is contingent compensation? It is a payment that depends on an event to happen. And so it's a good example is if the artist earns a percentage of the door, that's going to be based on every, ticket that's purchased or admission that's granted. And so that's the contingent event that's going to cause an artist to be able to get a piece of that. And so these are some common deal structures The first one is what I mentioned before, a guarantee plus a percentage of ticket sales. That's a very common way to structure a deal, but you need a little leverage to get that upfront guarantee. You need to have a follower. You need to be bringing people to have that upfront guarantee. So more often, I feel like you get a straight door split, which is you're just getting either 100% of what you bring into the door, depending on the club, or possibly less. In the Los Angeles area, they do something called pay to play, where the artist has to pre-buy the tickets up front and sell them his or herself for as much as he can or wishes to, or they can. But that is not that common outside of Los Angeles or outside of certain places. Another thing to ask for, especially if they don't agree for an upfront guarantee, to pay an upfront amount, is you could get, and if you know you bring in a lot of people who drink, you can get a share of the bar or concessions potentially. But that's going to be a lower share. You're just going to get a little bit. They'll chip off something from the bar. And then I guess other places do bonus thresholds, like if you sell a certain number of tickets. I'm less familiar with that concept, but those are kind of the overview of the different types of deals that you're likely to see when you're booking your tour. And here are some tips. But my big tip is, if you, I think I mentioned this, but if you are going out gigging and you have an agreement that you're using as a template, make sure you have an attorney look at that. And they might have some good advice that I don't have. So here are some negotiating tips that you can find in the slides. So besides a share of ticket sales and concessions, another way you can earn money once you're out on the road is by asking for tips. And this is how you encourage tips. You make it obvious. You have a really clearly labeled tip jar with a QR code, which you have to set up front, going back to the signage that I keep emphasizing before you even go out. And so you want to mention it when you're up there. Mention they can tip this way, or this is how you can help the band. And then you want to see if you can accept lots of different payment types. And I think we'll talk about this later, but you probably need to set up a merchant account in order to process transactions easily. But hopefully you can take different ways of payment, because not a lot of people just carry around cash these days. And so, and you want to practice, I think, mentioning it in your routine. And so I also have some special tips for buskers, for those of you who are dipping your toe in. So this is just, again, emphasizing the display of your name and your social media handles so people can follow you on social media, and being aware of the vibe of where you are performing. And it does mention, some other tips, but the main thing though, when you're busking, is you can't legally busk everywhere. And so you need to check into whether it's legal for you to be busking there, and whether you want to take a risk if it isn't. Sometimes you need a permit. So it's good to investigate that. And so always check that. It's also important that you track your tip income for your records. So, I mean, I would use those settlement sheets to track it, basically, that I kind of gave you a template for. So the third way that you can earn money, but not before you go on tour, but while you're touring, is through merchandise. And so let's talk a little bit about that. We already talked about the staffing and making sure that you have somebody who's really a salesperson, or at least engaging person to man your merch table. But you also, like I said, want to make sure you set up your payment options and you have data capture there for customers and fans to sign up. And you want to price items that have easy math, and be prepared to break change if people are paying in cash, because especially if there's a line, it can be hard for people to do math in their head and things like that. So there's some tips on security and cash control. And I'd like to mention you should keep track of your inventory so you know how much is left every night. Not only should you be reporting your inventory sales in terms of dollars, but you should have an inventory sheet where you should be listing the quantity, not just the dollar amount. And that rolls up into the settlement sheet at the end of the night. So this is just more tips about fan engagement and mentioning again that settlement sheet that I think you're going to want to use. Then there's one more way that you can be getting money from your tour, and that is if you also wrote the music. If you are a songwriter of the music that you performed, you can potentially, although not necessarily, you can potentially collect performance royalties on that music that was performed. Here's the thing: the way in the United States, the companies that collect the performance royalties for live performance, they pay most of it out to like the top 40 or maybe the top 100 Polestar tours. They don't pay it out to independent artists, except historically, I don't know if they're still doing this, but historically they did set some aside for indie performers who send in their set lists. So every night, if you upload your set list to your PRO, maybe they'll pay you. I can't guarantee it, and I don't know 100%.
Worth a try.
Yeah, you could try.
Try.
I don't know how 100% how it works in other countries. That might be better. I don't know. However, it's good to get in the habit of doing this for any kind of exploitation, so that the PROs will know that your music was used. So anyway, we'll talk about PROs later. So does anybody have any questions about live income streams at this point?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Let's
So
see.
I'm going to move from live, which was the biggest income stream, to recordings, which is the second biggest at 30 billion, basically. So basically, this is showing historically all the way back to 1999 what the revenue looked like in the recorded music industry. And you can see when like downloads came out, it started declining, and then it took a while for streaming to overtake it, but now it is higher than it's ever been, and it's mostly streaming, as you will see. But I wanted to point out that I got this information from an organization called IFP, which is the International Phonograph Records Association. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's international, and it aggregates all of the data from all over the world. And so if you're interested in learning more about recordings, you should definitely go to the Google IFP annual report. And from that report, we can see that in recordings, the top selling territories are the USA still, followed by Japan, UK, Germany, and China. Those are the biggest revenue generating territories globally for recorded music. And there's a lot of growth, 23% in each of the following territories: the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. But to give you an idea of what is most popular, I think that for 2024, Taylor Swift was the most popular recording in terms of generating revenue, according to IFP. Streaming globally accounts for almost 70% of global revenue. So it's really important to focus on streaming. There are other income streams that we'll talk about, but we won't talk a lot about them because we're really focusing on streaming for this high level. And in the USA, this is the picture. We had 18 billion in 2024 in the USA. And you can see that the biggest piece of that, over 80%, is streaming. So again, especially for those of us who are based in the USA, I'm going to be focusing a lot on streaming today. But I'm going to point out that there's another material piece, which is physical. And then everything else is really small, including sync. So we're not talking about sync very much today. That would be a more advanced class. But this slide is focusing on the 15 of the 18 billion that is attributable to that streaming and subscription piece that I mentioned. And so, as you can see, if we're focusing on streaming, since that's the biggest piece of streaming is the paid subscriptions for streaming. That's generating so much more money than the ad supported. You can see how little the ad supported is here. And I think you need to consider whether your fans are the kind that pay for a subscription or not, because you need to have a lot more streams if they aren't subscribers, if you want to make money at streaming. You really want to be targeting fans that are music subscribers if you want to be making money in this area. There's this other piece here called neighboring rights, and I am going to get into it, but it works totally differently than the rest of the revenue here. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So in terms of recordings, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how important it is to strategize, how important the metadata is, and we're going to talk about just distribution mostly. And so things that you want to talk about with your attorney are, will your recording distributor, if you were like a little indie label, will the distributor collect neighboring rights? You want to know if you need to get licenses to clear samples, and you're going to need help negotiating that agreement. So this should all be addressed with your attorney. In terms of strategizing to make money at recordings, the first question is, where are you going to record? Not only can it be less expensive to record outside of the United States, but actually that little piece of neighboring rights income, you can earn more if you record outside of the United States. So if you have if it's easy for you to record in a territory where they have better rules about participating in performance income, you should consider doing that. You also want to think about minimizing costs. I recommend you read the book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Don Passman. I think that's really going to help you understand the way the record business works and all about building your team. Another way, though, to keep costs down is making sure you don't have an entourage of people depending on you. The more people that you're working with, the more you're going to be splitting up the money. So I would also consider doing buyouts and advances so that you don't have an obligation to account to people forever. If you want to be able to exploit a recording forever and you need to clear a sample, consider buying it out, because it's like a big pain to have to account to different people. It's very expensive. And then you can also consider getting sponsors to cover your costs, or crowdfunding, much like they can sponsor recordings. Tour, they can also sponsor recordings, as can record companies. Another thing to do when you're strategizing is target heavy fans. So there's like an essay called 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly of Wired, which I think he updated kind of recently, but that's really a good one to read to get an idea of how you may not need that many fans to really make a living, especially if they're heavy fans, which means that they buy a lot of your merch and go to a lot of your shows and listen to your music a lot.
Can I ask a question here from Megan?
Yeah.
If she's saying something about subscription to the streaming platform, and I don't,
Let me see. Let's see. It's in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah. She said like subscription to the streaming platform, and I don't know what part. Megan, what were you referring to in that question?
It was a few slides ago that you had mentioned. It was one of your pie charts.
Mm-hmm. This one?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was like you mentioned,
Right.
considering if your fans would be subscribers. And I just wanted to clarify if you meant to the actual streaming platform or something.
To actual streaming platforms.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because most of the money from the streaming platforms is for the paid subscriptions. Very little of it is for ad supported. Thanks for asking that. Sorry, I'm not very good at reading the chat and doing this at the same time, so I'm glad
No,
you.
it's fine. That's why I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Co-pilot.
All right. So, oh, that's so funny. You know what? It was the next slide. I actually had built in the slide again afterwards. If I had just gone to the next slide, we could have recapped it. But I want to give you guys an overview of how the money flows. So this is for interactive audio streaming. And basically the money comes into services from consumers and advertisers. And the services are paying the record companies for the use of the recording for interactive. Oops. And then the record companies are paying SAG-AFTRA and the AFM, your union, and they're paying the artist. And they do pay like upfront for the sessions musicians too. And the producer usually comes out of the artist share. So that's all kind of being paid by the record company. But then also, you know, if you've registered with your local union, you do get some benefits from the union, especially as a sessions musician. So I encourage you to do that. And this is showing, actually, this is kind of illustrating the point we were just talking about how how the subscriber plays are worth a lot more than the non-subscriber plays. So on Apple, they only have subscription. And basically, in order for your little indie label, if that's what you are, to generate $1 million from streaming, 100 million plays need to be played on Apple by subscribers to generate $1 million. Or let's just say you aren't the label. Let's say you're a producer of something and you get 3 points on the record. It means that out of 100 million subscriber plays, you would get 30,000.
How about if I'm the artist? If I'm the writer and the artist, what do I get? I mean, because it's really pennies.
So if you're sorry, let me go back. If you are the artist and you're an independent artist and you created the recording and you put it up yourself, you get all of the $1 million, like maybe less the distribution fee, right? But if you are signed to a record company and you are only getting a 33% share of the streaming revenue, then you're going to be getting like $330,000. Some artists even get it less than that, and some artists get more. Some artists get like 17% or 18%, and then the producer share comes out of that, and then other artists get 50%. But basically, it's going to be a fraction. Basically, every point, meaning every percentage point, is worth $10,000 in these examples. So if you're an artist and you get 50%, it's going to be 500,000. If you're an artist and you get 17%, it's going to be 170,000. There's different kinds of deals, basically. But if you own your own recordings, you get the full $1 million, basically.
I mean, the problem is that with Spotify as an example, by the time as an independent artist, the money trickles down to the independent artist. It isn't that much per stream versus what you're saying with a subscriber play. Just making
so for Spotify, it takes 200 to 333 million subscriber plays to hit that. Whereas for Apple, it's only 100 million. So that's 2 to 3 times or more as much, and that's for comparing the subscribers. Then Spotify has an ad-supported level, and it can take 1 billion streams to generate that same threshold of like a $10,000 point or $1 million to the record label. meaning, I mean, that's a lot, right? 1 billion ad-supported streams, and it's not really a lot of money for what that is, because you're
Yeah.
right. Once they make a deal with either a distributor, they're going to lose 15 to 20%, or a label, they're going to only be getting 50% or less. And then obviously they have team members they have to pay. And so you're right. It's very hard unless you're getting streams at the level of hundreds of millions.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
that's the thing as an independent artist, to understand that, because when you sign up with TuneCore, whoever your distro kit or whoever you're utilizing to push out your streaming as a distributor, and that's the other thing where distribution companies are getting more, for independent artists, they're getting more competitive to say, I'm going to give a better rate, or I'm going to reach more outlets or what have you. So there's all these variables for an independent artist. Like everything you're saying is sort of like, oh my gosh, as an independent artist, I have to be responsible because A, I don't have a manager yet, or I don't have enough money for a lawyer, a legal support. And so just trying to, and all of this is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And I know you've got more to go through, but just things of in terms of, oh, first it's like, I'm going to make a song, then I'm going to push it out in the way I'm supposed to push it out. And then I'm going to do my social media. Oh my gosh, I got to think about touring. No, I got to think about merch. I got to think about this. So there's a lot here, and I'm so grateful you're here to lay it all out. And then they have the access to this presentation to continue to digest this, because it is important for people to hear what you're saying, which is, hey, this may not be, you have to play this game, but there might be, per what, Cedar, what do you think is the optimal way for artists to really look at and focus on to generate revenue for themselves? If you're just a little itty bitty artist, like, what do you think the top 2 things are? I mean, I personally think it's touring.
yeah, that's why we spend the most money on live. It's like selling the merch, going on tour.
I personally think it's touring. And then people get, and if you're a great songwriter, great, go write a bunch of co-writing songs with a bunch of people, and then maybe get splits in that. And it really just depends on the artist, and trying to optimize who are you as an artist and how can we best support you and living your life. So anyway, keep going, Mama.
Sure. So we basically want to focus. This is what I want you to hear from me, because we only have a few more minutes left. I want you to hear that in order to be collecting money on the reporting side, and then ultimately on the publishing side, which we'll get through in a minute, it's very important for you to do something very boring, which is assemble a lot of information about each work and track. And so on the recording side, it's especially important that you get what's called an ISRC code. And that is a code that's assigned to every sound recording. And it allows different companies to track and report streams to different entities. So that is very important. And then for products, you need a UPC code or an EAN, which is basically a barcode. So there's more detail here. It's very important actually to assemble this information. And I just want to emphasize that because you can't get paid without it. So moving along to the different distribution and or collection partners that you're going to need to engage. You need to think about who you want to be distributing digital, who you want to be distributing neighboring rights, who you want to be distributing physical, and who you want to be distributing or collecting on foreign, basically. And so it's very important to get up there. And so there's like a list of different distributor partners and like who they're geared towards helping here, which we don't have a lot of time to go over, but maybe this is helpful to you. So I do want to talk really quickly about neighboring rights, because that's a whole other income stream that isn't coming from those interactive streaming services like Spotify or like YouTube or something. This is coming from digital radio services like Sirius XM and Pandora, at least in the United States it is. And what happens is subscribers and advertisers pay these services, and then the services pay collection agents, which in the United States, it's a company called Sound Exchange. And then they also pay the other half to the record company or the owner of the sound recording, which you, as an independent person, you are probably going to have to register both pieces, once as the record company and once as an artist, because what happens is Sound Exchange pays the artist directly and even the producers directly. And it pays the record company. So basically it splits all the income in two pieces. One goes to the artist, one goes to the record company. And so when you get your ISRC code or your EAN code, you need to go to Sound Exchange and register that so that you can get paid as an artist. And you need to register as an artist so you can get paid as an artist. And you also need to register it as the record company if you own the recording, so that you can get paid as the other half as a record company. Very important to do that, to be able to collect that share. And so this is just a slide to remind you to be registering that, like I just mentioned, the ISRCs with Sound Exchange. And you want to register your copyrights and your trademarks and everything like that. That's something you work with your lawyer on. And the problem is, this is not passive. Once you've registered it, the money theoretically should flow, but you have to go in and make sure that it is and that things aren't messed up. And so you always have to go back in and check at Sound Exchange to make sure that everything that should be paid is paid, and at your distributor as well. Do we have questions regarding recording income streams? Okay, I'm going to move to the merchandise section, which I'm going to go through pretty quickly because we did talk about it a lot already. So basically, we mentioned some things about selling tour merch and things you needed to do. Oh, the merchandise can be part of a record deal too, not just the touring. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of, at the big level, like all of the big major labels have their own merchandise company. And usually if you sign with a major label, they'll want to sign you to their merch company too. But as an independent artist, you're probably going to be selling your own merch. And what I wanted to understand is if you get into a license deal with a merchandise partner or not, there's basically there's three other ways you can earn income from merch. One is your direct to your fans web sales through a website or a Shopify that you can have somebody manage. The second is wholesale sales to retail, which you're going to have a hard time doing on your own. I don't really think that's an independent kind of a game. That's usually a retail partner or a merch partner will do that. So like sales to Hot Topic for concert t-shirts or things like that. And then also the licensing of your marks and your artwork, meaning like album artwork on a t-shirt or something you can actually license, so you aren't taking the risk yourself. And I actually did screenshots of actual statements. So this is a wholesale statement to a recording artist. And this is some ideas about how to make money doing that direct to consumer on the website, which we don't have time to spend really going through, but this is an example of the wholesale sales statement to an artist from a major merch partner. You can see what the detail looks like here. And then here are tips about selling merchandise on a wholesale level. I think, yeah, so then there's licensing. And then I'm worried that some of my labels were wrong on those slides, but this is licensing, where basically you just collect a royalty. And this royalty is like between 11 and 18% in this example, or 18 and 30%. So that's kind of the royalty rate range you'd see. Does anybody have questions about merchandise income streams? Okay. I know we got a little bit of a late start. Do we have 5 more minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up by going through the last pieces. Basically, for name, image, and likeness, that's like your personal, as an artist, like your own likeness and name and image, and the likeness can include your voice, but not necessarily singing recordings, but it can include your voice. So this income stream includes like paid partnerships. So I think on a big level, if like getting a cosmetics contract, for example, would be like a way to make millions of dollars at this. Or doing a fragrance deal is another way to make a lot of money. In the past anyway, with your name and likeness, like you appear in ads, you might go to appearances or events for the brand company, and they pay you a lot of money for it. And maybe you include some of their products in your videos, and do like influencer type stuff. But also there's a thing with AI where they're creating digital clones of people, and this allows advertisers to create an AI version of you for their advertising. And this is a very controversial, interesting area, but it is starting to happen. So it's something to be aware of another way that you could be monetizing your name and likeness. One of the things to keep in mind is, unlike copyright law, which is country by country, right of publicity, and these kinds of rights go state by state and in the United States. And so it's really a patchwork of laws. We have a lot of laws in California that cover it, but it depends on the jurisdiction whether those would apply. And so it's something to talk with your legal team about, basically. Do we have any questions about that, about name, image, and likeness?
If you don't have a legal team, Pandion will try and help you with your questions. And then it's also a very much DIY, trying to figure it out yourself. But we're here to support you as a community when you do get stuck, because we understand that it's a challenge to be an artist these days.
Yeah. Okay, so the last piece I'm going to talk about is publishing. And, it's about equal to merch. Basically, I'm going to try to run through this pretty quickly, but I'll stay on extra long for questions. There's an entity called CISAC, CISAC, and that entity is a great place for information that you should go to. It also does an annual report, which just came out last week. So that's why I have 2023 revenues instead of 2024. It didn't come out in time for me to make this slide. But this is showing the global breakdown of where revenue is coming from in the music publishing space. And a little over a third is what they're considering to be digital, which might be less than you would think compared to the reporting chart that we saw. And then 30% of it is like terrestrial broadcast, TV and radio. And then another more than 20% globally is from live, and also, public performance. So there might be more opportunities to earn this on an international scale in just the United States. But very little of it is from CD and video. Very little of it is from sync. I know people like to talk about sync a lot, and that is a good way to get money, but that's more advanced actually than what this is here, what we're going to talk about today. So I'm really just going to focus on these big pieces. And what I wanted to mention is, in publishing, just like in the recordings, I want you to remember the metadata is very important. So just like there was an ISRC code for the recordings, there's something called an ISWC code for the musical works. You need to go and get those from your performance rights organization, ASCAP, BMI in the United States. There's different territories that have different PROs. But you want to get all of this, all of the metadata that you can before something is released. Because what I see time and time again, and actually this starts with being in the studio when you're writing, you want to get your splits down so that you know what you can register, so you can get it all registered. Because what I see over and over again is like independent artists or independent labels, when they go put those recordings up, there's a place where they can put the publishing information, who the publishers were, who the writers were, what the splits are. And that way it makes it very easy for the publishing money to come through this complicated system. But they don't know it yet because the parties haven't even agreed on what the splits are, or somebody hasn't gotten the work information or this or that. And as a result, the recordings being exploited out there, and the streaming services are, you'll see in this chart, are going to pay the MLC collective, which is who collects the publishing royalties from the interactive streaming services. But the MLC is not going to know who to pay because there's no information about who the song is, or what the song is, or who the songwriters are. So it doesn't know what publishers to pay. And the services also pay PROs, and they don't know who to pay if the song is not registered. So it's very important to agree on splits and get those songs registered with your PRO, whichever one that may be, and the MLC. Because the way it works is those services pay those entities, so those entities have to know who to pay. And then the PROs pay the writer directly and pay the publisher directly for the performance piece, as we call it, of the copyright. Whereas the record companies pay the publisher for what we call the reproduction or the mechanical portion of the copyright. So this road is the mechanical reproduction road of money, and this road is what we call small performance road of money. So for non-interactive audio streaming, you know how we were talking about this earlier because we were talking about neighboring rights? Well, those same services like internet radio similarly have to pay PROs, and actually just regular radio stations and broadcasters have to pay the PROs, and the PROs again pay the writer and then the publisher, and then often the writers get a piece of the publishing as well. So that's how that money flow works. Video streaming on YouTube, I'm not going to get into because we don't have time, but there's some slides here that help you understand how that works. And then for foreign, basically, the services are paying societies and publishers, and those societies and publishers pay the writers. So we've gone over the live performance, the recordings, the merchandise, the name, image, and likeness, and the music publishing income streams. I will stay on if you have any questions. But in any case, this has been a wonderful hour and 10 minutes that we shared, and I appreciate everyone's patience as we move through the slides, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Cedar. Does anybody have any questions? Because Cedar, thank you for blazing through that pretty effectively, and there's still little nuances and intricacies that, like we said, once everybody leaves this call, if you could fill out the survey, and then we'll send you all of the forms and the leave behinds that we have to share with you. So is there anything else though that anybody would like to talk about? No. You know, one of the things for me is that how artists really think that sync is where it's at, and they get their knickers in a twist about that's the thing. And I say, yes, and, you know, they get really focused on that. And I just want to encourage artists to look at their whole pie and not just get tunnel visioned into what they think their career could be. So that's just something that I, you know, as you're sharing on all the 5 different ways that you can make money.
Yeah. I mean, I usually do cover sync if we're just talking about publishing or we're just talking about recordings, because I think it is important and it's accessible to independent artists. But at the same time, if you want to make big money, then you need to have more irons in the fire than just the one.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that independent artists also can make money touring. They just have to be strategic and smart and savvy about it. So it's there. It doesn't have to look like the big, massive rooms with all the lights. They can do it in their own way. So, but okay, well, if no one else has any questions, I just appreciate everybody jumping on the call today and for showing up. And yes, again, thank you so much, Cedar.
Sure, it was a pleasure.
Deeply. And yep, getting some claps, getting some claps in there. And yeah, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to write us at hello@Pandion, and we'll get back to you with any information that we can share with you. But again, thank you. Please fill out the survey. We appreciate you, and stay tuned for our upcoming sessions that we have in December. Hope everybody has a beautiful today.